Lenore, what do you think is one of the biggest lies we have been told about happiness?
The biggest lies, that you can have it all the time, that it can be a permanent state of being, that I can have a happy life, meaning it's all good.
So, if that's a cultural belief that we can be happy all the time, or we should be happy all the time, or we should try to be happy all the time, then why do you think that's the case? What is the uh, what's the meaning behind it? Why do you think that people keep chasing a quite abstract concept without even knowing? It seems like a lot of people don't know what happiness truly means, and yet they're pursuing something that they don't fully understand.
Yeah, I mean, the word happiness itself is one of those words that it can mean a lot of things, right? Even in the research on happiness, the big studies, you've got a big difference between when you ask somebody to stand back and assess their lives. How happy are you with your life as an assessment, and the other studies, which in my view are actually the closer approximation of how happy we are in our lives, which is where they do what we call experience sampling. And so what they do is, and there was this massive study in my TEDx talk, I mentioned the link between money and happiness, and that was based on this massive study that was done with something like 30,000 people. And they were pinged numerous times a day and asked a series of questions about the feelings that they'd felt in the preceding few hours. And so when you do studies on happiness that way, that's where you find that the link between money and happiness is so tenuous. So if you're actually talking about a state, an emotional state, that link between money and happiness is very tenuous. And I think that's probably what people think about usually when we talk about being happy, is the positive feelings, excitement, joy, friendliness, all those sorts of, nice, pleasant feelings. But the thing is, and this is actually one of the Buddha's key insights, was that experience is dynamic. Every moment, every experience that we have is what it is because of the coming together of a bunch of conditions. And at a very broad level, you can say they're internal conditions. So they're my personality, they're my mood at the time, they're how my body feels, there, what happened 5 minutes ago, and the emotional sort of ripple effects of that. So all of those internal conditions, and then the external conditions. So what's going on around me, and in every moment, those two things are coming together, and they're producing this experience here right now. And one of the other key insights of the Buddha was that everything's changing. There are a few, what I call, what's my little nickname for them? Tragic misunderstandings about life. And one of them is that you can have something that is reliable, permanent, and stable, and you just can't. The nature of experience is that it's unreliable, impermanent, and unstable. So if you've got those external conditions that have that characteristic, and you've got internal conditions that's not to say there's nothing that's relatively stable, like personality, in a sense that a psychologist might talk about it, where you might sit on the big 5 personality variables. That will tend to produce some pattern of relative stability over time across the board. But it's certainly not fixed, and it certainly doesn't dictate that every moment is going to be stable and permanent and predictable. So if we can truly, 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 truly accept this reality that things are changing all the time, inside me, outside me, and those two sets of things coming together is my experience, then how could we possibly think that we could be permanently anything, let alone happy?
That is interesting, because I think that I love what you mentioned about the Buddha, because I think that I've come to believe that people don't have a circumstance problem. I think they have a perception problem. And if you look at life, as you said, that I don't know if Buddha said this or somebody else says this, that there's nothing in life is neither good nor bad, positive nor negative. You can almost even say that life on a vacuum by itself, on its own, is meaningless. We are the ones who attach meaning to it. So if we can make peace with the fact that everything is changing, then we can change our perception and accept that fact and be more at peace. I wouldn't say necessarily happy, but we would just walk away from the negative emotion, which is at the same time tricky, because our brains are trying to keep us safe, are trying to keep us in the familiar, and trying to predict everything that's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, in the next 5 hours, maybe in the next 5 years. And yet, I guess it's just being comfortable within the unknown, with the things, hey, I don't know how this is going to react. As you said, not everything is stable, and not everything is permanent. Is how we can come to a peace with the fact that these are the things. And maybe with that, maybe if we accept that uncertainty is the rule and certainty doesn't exist, it only exists in our imagination, maybe we can have a more like a more positive emotion. Because I do believe, and I don't know what you think about this, that the pursuing happiness itself can become a form of avoidance, almost like a subtle way to bypassing discomfort, grief, or even existential messiness, because people cannot tolerate those negative emotions. What do you think about those? I don't know, just an idea I just had right now.
I think that's a really, really central, pivotal understanding to have. So, if we, another one of the Buddha's key insights, and this is what his awakening was, was this deep penetrating insight into the nature of experience, of being a human being. And one of the key things was that with being alive, comes, there's pleasure and there's non-pleasure, the two ends of the spectrum. And what happens when the difficult stuff arises, and also actually, funny enough, happens when really pleasant stuff arises, but is that we get reactive. And so we get reactive into this mode of, oh, it feels good, I want more of that. Or, oh, that feels unpleasant, oh, no, let's get rid of that. And so it's this reactivity to experience that causes so much of our distress in our lives. And so what you're saying is very similar to what I've just said, in that we get reactive around the positive. We think that we have a fantastic experience and we can make that last forever. And there's the tragic misunderstanding that it can't. So if we expect that, I have in this online development program I'm putting together, I talk about expectations and the impact of expectations. Because if we expect that this can be our permanent state, we are going to be disappointed, because that's not how reality works. And there's a fabulous concept that you come across in spiritual circles of the spiritual bypass. And that is where people are attracted to, some form of spirituality usually because of some kind of pain. Sometimes it might be sort of just emptiness or lack of fulfillment, but often there's some sort of difficulty that sends us, searching, becoming a spiritual seeker of some kind, looking for the answer. And what can happen is that, you find something that brings some sense of relief and you grab onto that. And you see this even in Buddhist circles with people who their daily meditation practice, for example, they get really focused on, meditation must be calm and must have my, 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever, in the morning of Zen, of my, and if they don't get it, or, something happens and they don't get their half an hour on the cushion that morning, they get really upset. And that is exactly what you're talking about. There's now become a reactivity to the pleasant. And I expect to have a pleasant experience on the cushion in my meditation in the morning, and I didn't get it. And so now I'm unhappy because of it. So it's that clinging to pleasure. There's even a perspective on some of the religious Buddhist traditions which suggests that all difficulty can be transcended. That this reactivity, this clinging, is what causes the difficult spaces in life. Therefore, if we can get rid of the clinging, then voila, all the difficult stuff's gone. But actually, it's not, because we are literally sensitive creatures in a world that is swirling with factors we don't control, and so there is going to be some unpleasant experience as part of being a human being. There's just no two ways about it, and so being able to actually genuinely see that and accept it as part of the gig of being a human, that's actually what brings the peace. It doesn't have to be a unpleasantness-free life to have peace. It's actually the rolling with it, the ability to accept that there's difficulty in life. There are difficult spaces in life. It's part of being a human being. And roll with it when it comes, and allow unpleasant feelings. I would say that is, if we really were to boil it down, if we can allow the inevitable unpleasant feelings that come as part of the package of being a human being, our lives become a whole lot more peaceful and a whole lot happier, dare I say it.
There you go.
The stuff that is difficult flows through our life rather than, getting stuck in little side eddies of the creek.
That is very interesting. I had a couple of thoughts. The first one, when you said, going back to the initial response, that we cannot be happy all the time, or there's the belief that we should, or we could, or we should strive to be happy all the time, that we cannot be in the permanent state. My brain, after what you just said now, went to, well, if I was a cynical person, and I used to be, now I'm less, but I would argue, it's like, well, people can be angry all the time, people can be sad all the time, people can be depressed all the time. How come we can have those emotions for long stretches of time but not happiness? And I guess because of our negativity bias and rumination, we can just give ourselves that pain. It is much easier to put ourselves in a emotionally painful situation over and over and over again than to give us happiness. But on the flip side, when you were saying that, oh, we want to be happy all the time, well, if we are happy all the time, are we truly happy? If we don't have anything to compare that to, if we have no pain, then how do we know that's happiness? How do we know that's a positive emotion if we cannot compare with something negative? So I think that it's the balance and the duality of things. And as you said, if we can accept that life has some struggles, that life has some challenges, that life has some obstacles, and we have some setbacks, and we have negative emotions, and we have all this, that makes us appreciate happiness even more so when we have it and when we experience. But it seems to me, as we were talking about, that people trying to escape the negative emotion, and sometimes, and I wonder this from somebody who has achieved a lot of success in the business world, a success as an athlete, so many world championships. Do you think that the obsession of feeling good all the time, of reaching that dopamine hit, of getting the next promotion, or buying the nice car, or getting that medal, is actually disconnecting us from true fulfillment?
I think the idea that any one experience is going to make you happy is a delusion. And so, yes, fulfillment doesn't come from any one thing. And just back to your earlier point, sorry, I thought it was an important one that you said earlier, that we can be angry all the time, or we can be negative all the time, or what have you. I think if you actually looked at, you're probably thinking of some people you've known when you say that. I think if we went and did some experience sampling with them, you'd find that they're not actually angry all the time. You'd find that they have some habits of mind and some ways of thinking, and probably some faulty beliefs that send them into a spiral of anger frequently. But I don't think you'd find that they're angry all the time. We're not anything all the time.
I can see that. I can see that point. And I guess what I was referring to, and this is, I know I was going on extreme, but I was trying to play devil's advocate in that sense. 2-3 years ago, I went to deep depression. I lasted there for like 2 years or so. So I was depressed. I wasn't. There were moments during my day where I was, maybe when I was running, and when I was working out, where I just had a release from the pain, or from the suffering, or from the sadness. So I guess you're not sad or angry when you're asleep. So you cannot sustain that for a long periods of time. But I think, yes, even though we cannot have it all the time, because it would be, I don't even know if it's humanly possible just to do just to feel that. But I would say it's probably much easier than to feel positive emotions for long stretches of time. I think with the negative, it can be just like this. Positive, it takes a minute to just feel it, I guess.
Yeah, you mentioned the negativity bias, and we're wired to perceive and encode in memory and recall from memory much faster unpleasant experiences, negative experiences. And yes, we have to be quite deliberate in the way that we receive positive, or let's call them pleasant experiences, for them to actually impact us in the same way, at a visceral kind of level. And there are practices. So in my program, I talk about mixing it up, amping it up, and breaking it up. So even with just pleasures, understanding how this human organism works helps us receive pleasant experiences in a way that actually impacts us, rather than slipping right off, like we're the proverbial Teflon. But yeah, your point about when you were depressed, there were ups and downs, and I've noticed the same thing. If you suffer a loss and you're feeling grief, you can tend to think that when you're grieving, that's all there is. But no, actually, there are moments of levity and warmth and joy and what have you as well. While you're feeling sad, you can feel more than one thing at a time. It can be, for things like grief or like depression, there can be kind of a background hum of sadness or, downness or suckness or whatever it might be, that can persist for a long time. But you're not depressed anymore. So it didn't last either, did it? So
well, it took a lot of. I will say it took a lot of work, and I experienced grief because I went through a divorce, and you'll realize that grief is not linear whatsoever
yeah,
at all. When you think they're over it, it's like, okay, finally. No, we're not done yet.
yeah,
And then you go again. And I'm just like, what are we doing?
yeah.
So, but again, I do feel that some people might get caught up in the loop. They might not be depressed all the time, but they might have depression for 5, 10 years just because they haven't been able to address the issue. And almost one thing I realized, I probably didn't become, I wasn't addicted to the grief. I needed to experience the grief, but I was addicted to the suffering of the negative emotion. And I've shared this in the podcast in the past that sometimes, since I was somebody who used to feel the negative emotions all the time, I wouldn't try to push them away. I would just even bring them on and feel it at the fullest. But by ruminating as well, I trained my body, or my body created this automatic system that, okay, we need to suffer every day, that I'm just going to feel that sadness, I'm going to feel that grief, I'm going to feel that depression, even though we might not have a reason to do so. We will feel it because that's how you train us, that's how you train the body to do it. And first I became aware by reading this book from Joe Dispenza. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which was eye-opening. And what I realized is I had to do a strong mental exercise of, once I became aware, hey, I don't have to feel that way. I would just have to focus something else. But my body was pushing me. No, 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 no. We want to feel this. This feels like home. This feels some sort of comfort in the pain. And I think that that's why a lot of people get caught up in these. It took a lot of effort, basically. And I see how, if people are not aware, people don't have the knowledge, they can easily say, well, life is not even about being happy because I'm depressed all the time, I'm sad all the time, I'm angry all the time, without realizing that they can change that, but it takes a process to do so. But if that exists, then can we apply the same process to feel happiness more times than not?
Mm. I think from my perspective, human flourishing is about meeting your experience with as little overlay, with as little sort of fabrication, with as little stuff that you put on top of it as possible. And it's not possible to put no stuff on it. We come to it with a history and a personality and mental and emotional habits, which are kind of what you were just describing there. But to the extent that we can meet each moment and each experience as it is right now, with as little of that overlay as possible, and move through the experience and then let it go, because experience changes, it's dynamic, that's what it naturally does. Rather than trying, in a way you were just describing on the other end of the spectrum, a way of trying to keep a certain experience going, then I think that's an important part of human flourishing. The other is, and this is possibly also related to your depression experience, is that, we do need certain things as human beings to flourish. And it may be that, I would say very likely that when we suffer from depression, and I've felt that too, I've been through that, not for 2 years, but for, probably a few months, there's something missing in the flourishing, checkbox list. And that was the subject of part of my TEDx talk. And frequently, it's a misguided attempt to fill one of those needs, to tick one of those boxes by reaching for something that we think will fill that need, but it just doesn't. So, for example, people who are obsessed with stuff, money, to buy stuff, to have that nice car, to be wearing the expensive brand clothes, to be impressing people with their wealth. I always look, okay, what's the layer below? What's the layer below? What are they trying to achieve by doing this? And oftentimes it comes down to one of two things, which I think can be quite lacking in our modern societies these days, either connection or belonging. One of the two. So the logic, even though it's rarely articulated by the person who is stuck on trying to gain this money and this stuff, is that if I look successful, then you'll think I'm good and worthy of being known by you. You want to know me. You want me in your world. I'll feel connected with you. Or at least you might accept me and I'd feel like I belong. So I reach for all this other stuff to try and fill a need, which at its heart is something I don't need money to do, that I need to, go out and interact and share myself with people and be interested in other people and arrange my life so that I have other people in it. So it can be a really, a lot of the behaviors that end up leaving us empty are because we're reaching for the wrong tool for the job.
So it sounds like, and this is a topic I've explored a bit on the podcast because I'm kind of obsessed with that as well. Is our I think if every human experiences the same thing, is the am I enough? Am I worthy of connection? Am I worthy of love? Am I worthy of friendship? Am I worthy of success? And I guess that's why, maybe based on what you're saying, that people seek money or status or find cars or having all of these materialistic things, is because they're trying to connect and belong. Connect from a point of view that we're social species, so we have to connect. Is part of our needs. It's just part of our. It's ingrained in our DNA. And part to belong is, I guess, for a nervous system, from an evolutionary standpoint, if we didn't belong, that meant death. That means if we weren't part of the tribe, then we were outcaster. That was it. And it's funny because it's interesting that you said that, because I don't know if I was lucky or unlucky. I don't know. Maybe it all depends which angle you see it from. But I realized that all of that is an illusion. And the way I came to this realization is last year when I started the podcast. I was like 2 months in. I was targeting a guest I wanted to bring on, but I wasn't sure yet. I mean, I wasn't confident enough. I was starting. I didn't have a big audience. I was like, okay, I need a little bit more reps. I need to practice more. I need to have more episodes under my belt. And maybe a few months passed by. I asked this person. This person agreed. I was excited. But for me, I wanted this person, and just like I do it with every other guest, but with this one was in particular more determined to do so. I want the guest to leave this interview feeling like, oh, I'm so glad I said yes. If I had a wonderful time, I had a great experience. It felt comfortable. It felt nice. It was awesome. So I did a ton of research on this person. I this person being on another podcast, this person has a podcast. So I did a lot of research, and my whole goal was to make this person feel special, be seen and understood in a way that, okay, I wanted to know more about them, what makes them unique. That was my whole goal. I went into the interview. I was like anxious. I was so anxious. It was like 5 p.m. in the afternoon here. It went well to the point that after the talk, the person, without me asking, said 3 or 4 times, "Oh, you're an amazing interviewer." The other person was blown away by how the interview went. And when I was then driving into the gym a couple of hours after that, it hit me that I was almost feeling sad or depressed because even though I had quote unquote achieved the goal, which was serving the other person, make the other person feel special or unique and feel that, hey, I'm so happy I said yes, I gave you the opportunity to have me on the podcast. I didn't feel it. And it was more like a self worth thing. I didn't even believe it, even though the other person was saying that. And the other person was genuine when they say that. That's when I realized, wait a minute, doesn't matter how much validation I get from the outside world. If I don't feel it inside, it's never going to work. And I was able to catch it early in terms of, okay, I need to work on myself to really accept that kind of compliment. Why do I say it was lucky or unlucky? Well, because if I had that sense of inadequacy for longer, I could have achieved more success. I would have been driving and trying to fill that void and then realizing, oh, it's not, I won't be able to feel it because I need to do it internally and nothing else matters. But again, I say part of the pain, but going back to your point is, it seems like that is the number one issue with people, is just feeling worthy and accepting that their essence, who they are as humans, is enough. If you experience that, some sense of unworthiness, like we all experience, how do you make peace with that? How will you able to move past that and be okay with who you are, regardless of what you accomplish or have?
Mm, mm. Um, I think cognitive behavioral therapy is really helpful for that sort of stuff. We know how to work with this kind of material. For me, personal growth, works with that kind of material because you start to notice the patterns. A lot of it is stuff going on up here about what is or isn't true with regard to what other people think, and discovering for yourself. There are usually some beliefs in there that are tripping you up. Beliefs like, well, unless I'm perfect, or unless I get it right all the time, or unless I'm amazingly outstanding, or unless I win everything, or unless I dominate, or unless everybody listens to and agrees with absolutely everything I say, then I'm not good enough. So that any one of those things means that they don't think I'm worthy, or that they don't like me, or they don't want to know me, or they don't want to be part of my world. And that is usually false. Right? It's usually wrong. but we don't mean to. We don't grow up meaning to trip ourselves up in these ways. They're just beliefs, usually self-protective beliefs. We've come across some situations in our developmental lives that have taught us rightly or wrongly these little lessons, and we need to unlearn them. And a huge part of that is noticing that even when we're not those things, people still like us. Even when I'm not, right all the time, even when I'm not sounding particularly intelligent or wise, or whatever it is that we have that we're supposed to be in order to get people to like us. When we actually start noticing our experience more closely and noticing that, well, actually, yeah, there was that time when I said something stupid, or not terribly intelligent, or revealed my ignorance in one area or something. Actually, people still liked me. They still came back for more. Like, they still invited me to participate. And so starting to notice that the links, that unless I'm this, then that, actually they're not, that they're faulty. They're faulty links. So I think that, and cognitive behavioral therapy sort of will work with a lot of that sort of stuff. I think the other thing is self-compassion. So, giving yourself a break, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're a human, and allowing yourself to be flawed. And if you've got a rule, if you've acquired a rule somewhere in your developmental years that I mustn't be flawed, like I have to be perfect or I won't be loved. Like, that's a terrible one, because to learn and to grow, you need to be willing to look at your messy stuff. You need to be willing to, I call it, at its most intense, I call it inviting your demons in for a tea party. You need to be willing to look that scary thing in the eye and get to know it. So whatever it is that that sparks your sense of unworthiness, invite it in. Sit it down. I actually have a little lovely illustration. I got this illustrator to do for me, and there's a little kitchen, and there's a little round kitchen table in the middle, and there's a young woman sort of sitting at the table with a pot of tea, and there's a demon, like a scary looking monster, sitting on the other side of the table, and the girl is looking calm, not like she's having a great time, but she's calm, and she's there, and she's attentive, and she's paying attention to this creature on the other side of the tea table. The creature's looking a little bit perplexed. It's not used to being invited in. It's usually just outside the window, rustling the bushes and having its effect out there, and it's not used to being offered a cup of tea. And so the idea is that, whatever that demon is, whether it's, if I'm not the best, then I won't be loved. So invite that one in and get really curious. And the goal is not just to withstand having the demon in the room, it's actually to get to know that demon. Tell me about yourself, little demon. So what's this about, and what drives you, and when do you come to life, and what gives you energy? And just really, really get to know it. And I'm a very evidence-based, scientific, love that term, human. And I don't have a lot of time for what I call hoomy-goomy. So when I say magic, I don't really mean magic, but there's something that feels like magic when you really do a good job of inviting your demon in for a tea party. It feels like magic because it happens so fast, and it happens, you don't feel like you're doing it. It sort of happens to you, which is that a whole bunch of tension and fear just disappears, because your body mind has an experience of being able to sit down at that table with that demon and be okay. And until we do that, you've probably seen, pictures or done it yourself where, you're casting a shadow on the wall with your hand. You can get pictures on the internet where somebody's doing this and there's a big, scary shadow monster on the wall that's being cast by somebody's hand. It's like we have stopped looking at the shadow, which terrifies us because it looks like a big scary thing, and we've gotten to know the hand. We've actually looked at the hand and gone, what's actually causing this? What's actually projecting this fear into my body mind? And when we have an experience of really looking at that, And we can go, oh, it's a hand. I know what's going on here. A whole bunch of fear and the stress and the tension just dissipates. And we now know that we can be with that demon. So coming back to the issue of being willing to be with the unpleasant, this is so fundamental. If we can grow our willingness to accept that there is unpleasantness as part of being alive and be willing to be with it as part of our human experience rather than running from it every time, it changes. So we've got to reverse, you mentioned about, evolution, and, on a physical sense, it makes sense to crave the pleasant and to avoid the unpleasant. Sweet foods would have helped us survive. Sex helped us survive. Pungent smells would have probably not been terribly good for our survival, if we went and ate things that smelled awful. Fearful things were probably not great for our survival. So the, run towards pleasure, run away from pain made sense in that setting. But when it comes to our emotional growth, we have to reverse that. We have to say, actually, if I want to make my peace with this, or I want to be able to work through it, or to coexist with this difficulty in my life, I need to be willing to be with it. And so now I go back to our original thing of being happy all the time. If we're not willing to experience anything unpleasant because we have this belief that my life is only going well if I'm happy all the time, I'm never going to do any of this work. I'm going to be running from these demons for the rest of my life.
How can you be happy if you're coming from a place of fear?
Correct. And there's a whole, there's a whole bunch of tension in that. I've got to, no, that's not good. I've got to make it good. My life. I remember in my early adult life, being aware that I did think that I was only doing well in life if I was happy. And that I remember feeling like a bit of a failure, because I noticed how often I wasn't. I could be all sorts of things other than, joyful or having fun or, laughing and what have you. There's all sorts of things. And seeing that, so even simply having a successful life equals being happy all the time, that belief in itself creates unhappiness because that whole swathe of your experience that doesn't fit under the umbrella of happiness then is seen as something wrong. There's something wrong with me.
I there's a lot of ideas. I just love everything that you said, but I'll start from the beginning. When you say self-compassion is huge, it took me 32 years. I'm about to turn 34. It took me 32 years to have self-compassion. I used to be really mean at myself. I give very much so, until I realized, well, one, this is not working at all. Second, if I want other people to do things or to change, I'm not mean to them. I have compassion towards them. How come I'm not doing towards myself? So that is one. That is something that I keep pushing on to people. Like, you don't have to be a surgeon or something like mean or evil to have a dictator in your body. You don't have to. You work better with self-compassion. The second thing you said about the demon, inviting demon in, which I love that metaphor, because I think a lot of people don't do it. And I believe is people want to be wrong about who they believe they are. Meaning, I'm not enough. I want to be wrong about it, but what if I'm right? I don't want to find out that I'm right. I'd rather live in vagueness of not knowing that, realizing that, what if I explore that? What if I invite that demon to have a tea and I realize that, crap, what I've been fearing about the most is true, which, as you said, is it never is true, or rarely is true. And it's interesting because I think that that's a key component, as you said, to happiness. And when I was rewatching your TEDx earlier today to prepare for this interview, and to just refresh all the content, there was a point in which you said that you were sitting at your, in your gym, just looking at the medals, and you feel almost like underwhelmed by it, that you have achieved all of this, and you said, well, happiness was just a feeling that you thought that you were going to have when achieving all of this. And I could relate a lot, because most of my life, when people ask me if I was happy, it's like, I don't know. I don't have a true definition of happiness. And then I started becoming obsessed with the whole thing. And seriously, when I stopped the TEDx at that point, when you were telling the story when you were at the gym, or at your gym, something came to me and say, wait a minute, what if we're looking happiness a from a wrong perspective? So I wrote this just today quickly, while the ideas were in my head, and I want to share with you and see what you think about it, because I think that maybe this approach could make people feel differently about it. So to me, this is the difference between feelings and emotions. Emotions are the raw physiological response we feel in our body, like sadness. We feel like crying. When we're angry, we feel like we want to punch a wall. We feel red. With anxiety, we feel like we want to throw up, and we can't breathe. But then happiness to me is like, okay, is happiness a feeling or emotion? And I started thinking, well, maybe happiness is a feeling, which to me is a meaning we give to an emotion. So we are not heartbroken. Heartbroken is the feeling. The emotion is sadness or grief. So basically, based on that, just giving a little bit of context for people, I said that emotions are raw physiological moment to moment responses. Like, we can feel fear, anxiety, sadness, happiness, joy. Feelings are the meaning we layer on top, our interpretation of what those emotions represent. And happiness, as we use it in language and culture, is almost never purely emotional. Seems like a narrative state. It's what we decide it means when we feel joy, peace, and presence. So when people say they're chasing happiness, they're really chasing joy and peace. And I think most importantly, they're chasing sustain, as we were talking about, joy and peace, which paradoxically they sabotage by chasing constant pleasure and constant success instead. And when they inevitably feel sadness or anxiety, they panic and conclude, I must not be happy. We feel peace when we're no longer at war with ourselves. We feel joy when we do things that lights us up, not impress others. And joy contains the word joy. Joy isn't the result of checking boxes, it's a result of being deeply alive in what we're doing. So what if the pursuit of happiness might be the wrong pursuit? If we go with the idea that happiness is just the meaning we give to joy and or peace, then we're pursuing a narrative, a meaning, a story. But peace and joy are available now, not after the next promotion, not once we have healed, not once we have earned it. Peace comes from acceptance, and joy comes from alignment. Maybe we have been chasing happiness like it is a destination, but happiness isn't a place. It's a byproduct of joy, emotion, and peace at rest. It's about finding joy in the process, not just the outcomes. We're not hustling to prove our worth, we're moving with joy. We're not haunted by anxiety, regrets, or the need to distract ourselves. We're at ease with our thoughts, our life, and ourselves. It is internal stillness without the discomfort. At the end, I think happiness might be a state where we are joyfully engaged when active and peacefully grounded when still. That's when it came after watching your TEDx. I was like, maybe if we change the way that we look at things, maybe if we're trying to find peace and joy on what we do, we can reach happiness as a byproduct of it. I don't know. I just wanted to share to know your thoughts about it.
Mm. So, as I think I said this right at the beginning, happiness, I think, is like an umbrella term. There's a bunch of things that we can include when we're talking about happiness. your way of passing emotions and feelings was interesting. I tend to, interesting, going back to the Buddha's teachings, he had lots of lists and ways of helping us pay attention to our experience. And one of the, there's one called the 5 aggregates of 5 heaps, which includes in there feeling tones. And he sort of pointed to that one just before we get into the more colourful descriptions of, you know, what we might say I'm feeling. And he talked about it as every experience we have has a feeling tone somewhere between pleasant and unpleasant. And more recent research on emotion has found, I actually now use a 2x2 matrix rather than just a, you know, one continuum. There's the one continuum of pleasant, unpleasant, but there's another one which you can sort of put on the vertical axis,
like a quadrant.
Yeah, and that one is energy, high energy or low energy. And so, you know, an unpleasant high energy feeling might be rage.
Okay.
An unpleasant low energy feeling might be depressed. A high energy pleasant feeling might be rapture, thrill, you know, joy, excitement. Low energy pleasant feeling, which I think is a quadrant that's highly underrated. You mentioned peace would be in there. Contentment, you know, might be down there. So when these are terrific little models to have at your fingertips when you're trying to pay attention to your own experience. So if you were to, you know, I think of meditation as simply being aware. So you can meditate in, 2-minute increment, you know, batches any point of the day. And here's one of the ways you could do it. What's present? What's here now? What's present now, right now? And you can start by tuning into, is it high energy? Well, where am I on the energy spectrum? Where am I on the pleasant versus unpleasant spectrum? And then once that's reasonably easy to tune into. And then you can start looking at, well, what are the actual feelings, the actual emotions that are producing that? And in fact, I've got a free download on my website if anyone ever needs help identifying feelings. It's based on an NVC, non-violent communication material. And so for me, the more helpful distinction when we're talking about feelings, so let's say we've got the sort of pleasant versus unpleasant, high energy, low energy bit nailed, okay, we're good there, is to differentiate pretty much everything else then is emotions, every other emotion word that we use, except that we often mix in perceptions or thoughts, let's say perceptions, with feelings, and we call them feelings. So, for example, I feel betrayed. Betrayed's actually not a feeling. Betraying someone is something you do. So if I say
it's a meaning.
Yeah. So if I say I feel betrayed, I'm actually, and this is problematic, and this is why it's part of nonviolent communication, which is a hugely beneficial resource if people ever feel a need for better conflict resolution with a partner, for example, or it's a really helpful thing self-developmentally, is to really hone in on what is the feeling. Try and keep the feeling language clean. And by clean, I mean not mixed in with perceptions or assessments or, in some cases, accusations. You know, saying to your partner, I feel betrayed, is essentially saying, I see you as having betrayed me. So that's an accusation. It's not a feeling. What is the feeling that goes along with a perception that I might have been betrayed?
Disappointment?
Disappointment, hurt, fear, shock. You know, they're all feelings. So again, this thing about if we can be really with our experience, including and importantly including our unpleasant experience, it helps it move through us, as it will naturally do if we don't make a mess of it. So by being able to be genuinely with whatever is here. So, if I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling afraid, I'm feeling sad, acknowledging that is a far more powerful way of being present to what's going on right now, and which then allows that experience to move through me, than it is I feel betrayed, I feel let down, I feel, which are all accusations actually, somebody having done something. They're not actually feelings, they're interpretations of something that you think might have happened. So there is actually a skill in becoming, I think it's really helpful to become conversant in the language of our experience. And so some of these little tools are really helpful. The feeling tone tool, just think of it as a tool in your toolkit for growing as a human being. And being able to articulate what I'm actually feeling right now in clean feeling language, rather than in, dirty is not the word, but it's muddied with accusations. Often is our perception, especially when it comes to feelings in relation to other people. So I highly recommend, and if anyone watching this podcast wants it, there's a free download. It's literally called "What Am I Feeling" on my website to help with that.
Do you think, I love that quadrant, and see how from tone and, I guess, high energy, low energy, unpleasant and pleasant emotions. Do you think that the suffering and even conflict comes from lack of language of these emotions? If we cannot clearly describe what we're feeling, if we cannot clearly identify or decoding our own emotions, then we cannot challenge whatever story or narrative our brain created around it, or even on a personal level as a suffering. But also, as you said, if we don't become very specific on what kind of language we use, we are accusing the other person, we're attacking the other person, we're making things worse. So it seems to me that part of people's suffering and misery comes from, one, a lack of knowledge of how their emotions work and the experiences that they have, but also a lack of language, not being able to articulate it well what they're feeling.
Yeah, I think that our language can become fuel to the fire, both in terms of interpersonal situations, but even with ourselves. So, we were talking earlier about the mental stuff that goes on about unworthiness. So what if we were to really look at that? What if we were to really be with that? And to be patient and tenacious about really describing to ourselves what's going on in that moment, when we're feeling unworthy. What if we were to stop and so I have a little shorthand, like if I'm ever feeling the need to ground myself, to be really present to what's going on right now, I have a little three touch points. Mind activity, and so that can include little narratives that are going round and round and round. It can be mental movies, mental movies about what might happen in the future, or mental movies about what did happen in the past. So whatever mind activity, I really actually articulate to myself what is going on up here. So mind activity, emotions, and we can use all of what we just talked about in that bucket. So the feeling tone part of it, as well as the more descriptive feelings that might fall in any of those quadrants, and then body sensations. So, okay, I've got this chatter going on in my head and this mental, catastrophe movie. I've got fear. I've got sadness, I've got whatever it is going on. It's unpleasant and it's high energy. And where am I feeling that in the body? So is it, in the chest, solar plexus? Is it in the gut? Am I feeling it all over? Are the arms and the legs kind of tingling? Is it pleasant or is it unpleasant? Is it moving? Is it still? Has it got temperature? Is it cool or is it hot? Does it have no temperature? So literally describe to ourselves what is going on here. The lovely little question that captures it all is, what is this? What is this experience? So let's imagine the experience of unworthiness in a moment. What is this? What's going on here? What's up here? What's it? I go, what's here? I was going to go, what's here? What's the feelings? Have you ever stopped and asked yourself how you know you're feeling something?
Recently, and by recently I mean the last year and a half or so, when I've especially when it's not a strong emotion, when it's not an overwhelming emotion, not when I'm fight or flight, when I have a sense of unease, so mild anxiety, something's off,
And how do you
and
know
it can,
it's of unease?
because somebody who used to suffer high levels of anxiety in the past, I know what anxiety sort of feels like. And when there's something in the chest, something's like, and what I've done recently is, okay, what I ask myself, what is my body trying to tell me? What is my brain trying to tell me? What is that hidden story that I haven't become aware of that is causing this feeling? Can I just give my brain or my body a peace of mind by saying, hey, no, we're going to be okay? That worst case scenario that you're imagining and giving me my sense of unease, it's okay. I'll protect you, or something, or that won't happen. But it don't I can but those are the hardest, because you see sometimes people, even people who just yell at the grocery store or just cut you out on traffic, they have that sense something is in there but they cannot identify it. And I guess, to me, I see that's when I ask myself, when it's not overwhelming, it's like, what is my body trying to tell me? What is my brain? Something's off. I need to understand what, and give some comfort to whether my brain, my body, my inner child, whoever
Yep.
is listening, I guess.
So they're all helpful practices. But my question is even more basic. How do you
Okay.
know? You did allude to it. You said, I've had anxiety and I get this feeling in the chest. We know emotions are physical experience,
Responses.
right? We know we're feeling emotion because we feel something in our body. And so this is what's really helpful to do this 3 touch points thing. What's the mind activity? What are the feelings? What are the body sensations? So let's say I'm feeling sad and fearful. And so I get curious about that. Okay, what's that like in the body? Where am I feeling it? And literally answer the question. Okay, I'm feeling it behind the solar plexus. There's like this hard ball with is soft on the outside, but it feels hard on the inside. And then I've got a more vague, jittery sensation through my arms and legs. Like literally answer it. Because what you're doing here is a micro tea party with your demon. You're showing your body mind that it can be with sadness and fear. And it's okay. It's not a mortal threat. And the more that we practice this willingness to be with, and not just be with, endure, but be with as in get curious about and really get to know, invite that demon in for a tea party, the more that becomes our natural reflex in a moment of difficulty, the more our experience will just flow, as it does when we don't pin it down. When we don't pin it down with rumination or making things out of it that aren't there, or hooking into old patterns or old mental movies or old beliefs about it. So if we can just be with what is here and get curious about
I like that a lot. And I guess understanding that emotions are not who we are, they're just experiences we have. And there's no reason to feel shame
it. It's just telling us,
about them.
as you said, it's an indicator. You know, it was one of my early in my sort of personal growth practice, was a startling insight, was that the body is a really reliable indicator that something's going on. And then you can, you have to build up your toolkit of helpful questions and practices and tactics to, well, what do I do with that? Okay, I've noticed my body's sort of feeling tight, tense, shoulders, stomach, whatever it is. So something's going on. So first of all, we've got to learn to even just have enough awareness about our physical self that we notice that. And then we need, some tactics and ways of getting curious about that and unpacking it and being willing to be with it.
Yeah, it's just information, I guess. Any kind of emotion, especially negative emotion, is just information. Especially if people get triggered, there's just information where they are something. There's a story underneath somewhere that is causing that trigger, and it's not the other person's fault or the event's fault. It's just how your body interprets that. And if you get curious, as you said, and this is something I've realized in the podcast, doesn't matter who I talk to, doesn't matter the topic. It could be relationship, it could be dating, it could be procrastination, anything. Literally, it seems like most of the things, if not every single thing, can be solved with through curiosity. Curiosity is this superpower that it allows to understand things better, to dissolve problems that we have created on our own, mostly unconsciously, and then we can have more believe more at peace. So I like that a lot. I like that approach on how to identify how efficient the body is in showing us when something is going on, and we just need to understand that that is just a signal to reveal to us something that we might need to address, perhaps. Eleanor, I love having this conversation with you. I still need to address all the 9 elements of flourishing that have to be for part two, because I had literally when I was crafting the interview for you, I had initially like 25 questions. Like I
We
every
just have
time I
to
just
talk
came
for
up with
3 hours, Daniel.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I was like, yeah, then I'll hate myself when I'm editing the videos. Like, man, why did it is so long? So, but yeah, I'll definitely gonna bring you a part two, because there's so much other wisdom and knowledge that you have based on your experience and what you have developed. But as a closing question, and this is maybe touching a tiny bit on part two in the future, is what would be one practical shift someone could make today to start moving towards a more fulfilling life?
Assess yourself on the 9 elements of human flourishing that we'll talk about in a minute. That's a really good starting place. And that's a nice segue. But just before we shoot down that path, there's one more really, really, really helpful thing that is relevant to a number of the things that we've talked about, just a little takeaway that might help people. You never know what sticks, and that is back to that issue of self-compassion, because you just commented on how important curiosity is, and you called it a superpower. I have these 5 growth superpowers, and one of them is curiosity. So you've just reinvented something that I've already used. So but the others are compassion is another one of them. Is the willingness to just have some empathy for myself, in that moment. Clarity is one of them, where we need clear seeing, and meditation is a really good way to do that. But also some of these other tools in our toolkit that help us see clearly. Courage is another one. It takes courage to invite your demon in for a tea party. It does. It's unpleasant. and you need to bring courage to do that. And the last one is commitment to growth, which is, you're going to fall off the wagon. It's okay. That's to be expected.
So, Lenore, it's been a wonderful conversation with you. I enjoyed everything that we talked today about happiness, the emotions, all these beliefs that we have on worthiness. And I'll have to bring you back for part two, as I mentioned earlier, just to touch the 9 elements of flourishing and how can people live a fulfilled life, find fulfillment, and maybe that would be a key way to find some level of happiness in their life. But where can people find you? Either take your courses, work with you, anything.
So my website, flourishpersonalgrowth.com, is the primary place to find me. And the tools that I've mentioned already can be found on there as well. So the What Am I Feeling little tool to help you identify feelings. And there are some other tools available on there as well, including a parka. I run a imaginary organisation also called PAR, which stands for People Against Rushing. And the idea of that is actually getting us to slow down and be present to our lives. So
I might need that.
Yeah.
I might need that. I might need that for sure. I definitely need that. I definitely need that. And yeah, I'll link all of those to the video and show notes. I also would encourage people to listen to your TEDx talk. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It gives a lot of understanding or how people see happiness and how they can just interact with other tools. Again, all these key components of flourishing to just have a more fulfilled life. Once again, it was such a pleasure having you on, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Enjoyed every minute of it.